Today on Aprender Inglés con Reza y Craig, do we say make an exam or do an exam? What's the difference between a master's degree and a bachelor's degree? We talk about academic terms and vocabulary on this week's show.
Hello and welcome to Aprender Inglés with Reza and Craig. My name's Craig.
And my name's Reza.
And together we're going to help you improve your grammar, grow your vocabulary and perfect your pronunciation, improve all aspects of your English and take it to the next level. How are you, Reza?
I'm fit as a fiddle.
What does that
top
mean?
Of the moon.
What does fit as a fiddle mean? You've said that before.
Fit as a fiddle. Estoy tan en forma como un violín. But doesn't really mean that, does it?
No se dice eso en español.
It means I'm doing very well, I'm feeling good, everything's fine.
I must say you're looking well. You're looking a bit tanned, healthy, in good shape.
No, I'm feeling good. I was recently down at Alicante on a holiday and it did me a lot of good.
Oh, pleased to hear it. Pleased to hear it.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling as fit as a fiddle. We have some feedback this week, Reza. A voice message from Igor from San Sebastian. Let's hear what Igor says about books and writers that we like.
Hi, Craig, Reza. This is Igor from San Sebastian. It's not a long time ago I following your podcast, but I find them very interesting, useful, and also very funny, with a good sense of humor, British, of course. And I sent to you this message to suggest to you another topic for other podcasts, which will be writers and books for people that are learning English. I suggest to you this topic. One day you were talking about Bill Bryson, a writer I like very much. I read from him a book called Short History of Nearly Everything, and I find it really interesting, fantastic. So that's my idea. Thanks for all, and bye. Sorry for the message before, but I think I spent too much time, more than 19 seconds. So I don't know if you got the message and the topic I was talking about. So just to tell you that maybe 19 seconds is not too much for for the people are not fluent in English, and just anyway, just to tell you, thank you for everything and all the fantastic job you are doing with this podcast, and I really love a lot. Thanks for everything. Bye.
Well, Igor, thanks very much for your messages. Just one thing, that writer, it's Bill Bryson. He's pronounced Bryson. I think you said Bill Bryson. Yes, he's a great writer. He's a favorite of mine as well. Very famous writer. Do you like him, Craig?
Yeah, I've read a lot of his books. He has written many books about traveling. Some of his earlier books are about traveling to the UK as an American, and then traveling and then living in the UK and traveling to America and looking at American society with British eyes, which is also very funny. And he's written a very, very funny book about Australia called Down Under. So if you're looking to read in English, I definitely recommend Bill Bryson. And
particularly to find out about British culture.
Yeah.
And comparing British and American culture, because he's an American living in Britain. Do you know his book, Notes from a Small Island? That's very funny.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite books of his as well. So definitely recommended. And also, when you speak about author and author of a book, use the preposition by. So it's a book by Bill Bryson. Yes, I know, Igor, the 90 seconds may not be long enough, but the reason it is 90 seconds on SpeakPipe is because that's the free version. And what you could do is you could write the message and then say it and make sure that the message fits inside the minute and a half. or you could record it 2 or 3 times, improve your pronunciation, keep working on making your message clearer, and that's one way of improving your speaking. So please send us voice messages, but remember, you only have 90 seconds if you use SpeakPipe. If you want to speak for longer, you could also record an MP3 audio file and just attach it to an email and send it to us. Apart from Bill Bryson, Reza, are there any authors that you would recommend for people looking to read in English and improve their reading?
Yes, I like Neil Gaiman myself. I've read a few of his collections of short stories, and I think they're really good.
Mm-hmm.
Are you a fan yourself?
I haven't read any of his books, but I know that he's written some very, very famous and popular books like The Sandman and The Graveyard. And I've been watching a TV series called American Gods, which is on Amazon Prime, the video service. And that series was written by Neil Gaiman.
Mm-hmm. A more classic author would be Ernest Hemingway, who's always popular. Ernest Hemingway is quite easy to read in a way, isn't he?
Yeah, that's why I often recommend Hemingway to students of English, because he tends to write in a very minimalistic style. He doesn't use long, complicated words. His books tend to be very direct, and his writing is very minimalist. So one you could start with, The Old Man and the Sea, El Viejo y el Mar in English. It's not a long book. It's quite short. It's a very good story. And you could start reading with that.
I dare say means me atrevo a decir. I dare say that a lot of our Spanish listeners and some of our South American or Central American listeners too will know the very famous Ernest Hemingway book, For Whom the Bells Toll, since it's about the Spanish Civil War, or it's set during the Spanish Civil War. That's a classic.
Have you read that, yeah?
I have, yes, and there's been a few films made of it.
Yep.
So, as is well known, Ernest Hemingway was a great traveller and was extremely fond of, that means enthusiastic about Spain. He loved Spain.
He did. Came here quite a bit. Yeah.
Another person, though I'm not sure I would recommend him quite yet, is my beloved George Orwell. I'm a huge fan, as Craig knows, and who also spent time in Spain. And in fact, I believe it is in Spain where he met Hemingway and they got pissed together. To get pissed is se emborracharon.
To get drunk.
Yes. They definitely got drunk together, and I think it was in Spain.
Maybe it was even in Valencia, because he used to come to Valencia quite often for the bullfighting and the beach.
Might have been, but I know there's a famous incident where they met and they got very drunk together. But I'm not going to recommend George Orwell because it's a bit tricky if you're learning English. Maybe when your level's a bit higher.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a bit higher for George Orwell, perhaps.
So yeah, those three you could start with: Bill Bryson, Ernest Hemingway, Neil Gaiman. And if you're finding those a bit too difficult reading in the original version, you could try starting with graded readers. Graded readers are books that are quite famous books, usually adapted for your level. So you could pretty much choose any level you feel your English is at. And obviously, the lower the level, the easier the text is. So graded readers, or you could read a book in Spanish first, so you know the story, and then read the original in English. We suggested that in the previous podcast with TV series and films. Why not do that with a book? Read it in Spanish, then read it again in original version in English to practice and learn vocabulary.
I think I've already told the listeners, I'm repeating myself, but I did that with El Quijote, which I think is a marvelous book, by the way, but may not have been a good book to start
Don Quixote.
early on with. Don Quixote, yeah.
La Mancha.
Don Quixote La Mancha. I read it in Spanish first, the original Spanish, which is not easy when it's your first year in Spain, with a dictionary, and I had to stop about 3 or 4 times every page and look up a word. It took a very long time to read it, but I did finish it. And then I read it much more quickly, of course, in English. And I thought, okay, right now I understand. And then I read it again in Spanish, and the second time much quicker. A bit like my advice for watching the films.
And how did you find it the second time you read it in Spanish? Was it more enjoyable? Did you stop? Did you stop so often?
Not as often, and it was much more enjoyable. And I guessed words that I didn't know before. I didn't have to look them up. But maybe El Quijote is not a good example because it's a very thick book.
It's quite long, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe use a shorter book. It's huge, yeah.
For Whom the Bell Tolls.
It might be better.
It's an epic. But I think the important thing there is to read for enjoyment as much as possible. So in English, try to find books that you really like the subjects. For example, Lord of the Rings. You might be a Lord of the Rings fan. You could read that in English. Harry Potter is very popular. You could read Harry Potter for yourself or to your children, perhaps. Batman, Superman, any type of comics in English. Very good idea.
Craig, more or less comics, but not quite, I guess. I'm not sure what the technical difference is, but graphic novels for people who are into, people who like to like that type of thing. It's basically like a very long comic with a little bit more of a story than a comic. Graphic novels can be an easier way to get to understand the story because there's lots of pictures.
Yeah.
If you don't understand the language, the picture kind of explains it to you without having to look it up. And as they say, a good picture can speak 1,000 words.
Exactly. Or even The Simpsons. Anything that is accessible, anything you think you'd enjoy reading has got to be good for your English. Are you reading anything at the moment, Reza?
I'm actually not reading anything at the moment. I'm waiting to start a book which has just come out by a friend of mine called Dana. I'll be reading that soon, and we'll be talking more about that in the very near future.
I'll look forward to that.
We'll be talking about Dana's book very shortly.
Next, we have a voice message from Yvonne from Valencia. Let's hear what Yvonne has to say.
Hi guys, it's Yvonne from Valencia. Firstly, I'd like to point out how useful have your podcast been for me. Since I started to listen to them, they've encouraged me each day from the beginning to see each single word that I didn't understand. It's a bit embarrassing for me because I've got to do it, but it's really helpful for me. Anyway, I beg you to make clear about a subject that I always get in trouble with, and it's a kind of messy in my mind. I mean academic terms, as for example, qualification, degree, bachelor, etc. For example, I'm trying to get my C1 English level, but I don't know how to refer to it as a title, Anyway, I hope that you have a great week and that you enjoy this wonderful weather also. So take care, guys, and thank you a lot.
Thank you, Ivan, for your message. It is lovely weather. Isn't it beautiful today in Valencia? Lovely and sunny, lovely breeze coming in from the sea. Definitely enjoying the weather here in Valencia.
Yes, and we are in the best place. We are on the Malvarosa recording. Not actually on the beach. Not on the beach, but near the beach recording. So we have a little sea breeze, Ivan, just to make you jealous.
Well, maybe Ivan is near the beach because he's in Valencia.
Well, let us know if you are, Ivan. We'll meet up someday.
Come over for a cup of tea. Anyway, thanks for your message. Just one thing. You said, I'd like to point out how useful have your podcasts been for me. I like the expression I'd like to point out, but because it's kind of an indirect statement, you need to change the order of the words. It's better to say, I'd like to point out how useful your podcasts have been for me. I'd like to point out, or I'd like to say how useful your podcasts are, or how useful your podcasts have been to me. It's not a question, so you don't need the question word order. Any other comments, Reza, on Ivan's message?
Yeah, he said, I beg you to do something.
That was quite nice, yeah.
That was a nice expression, yeah. I beg you, means
Suplicar.
please, please, please.
Suplicar.
However, something which I didn't quite understand Maybe you do, Craig. He said it's messy in my mind or something like that. I wasn't quite sure what he meant by that.
I think it's in Spanish you'd say tengo un lío en mi cabeza. It's like
okay.
it's messy. It's a bit messy in my mind. I think that's okay. I would say that.
Okay.
It's messy. It's a bit messy. Maybe my mind's a bit messed up.
Okay.
To use the phrasal verb to mess up.
Or he's a bit confused, maybe. He's a bit
Yep,
confused.
he's confused.
All right.
Be careful, Yvonne, with the pronunciation of title. The vowel sound is I, like my or by or try. So it's title. I'm not sure of the title. And by title, at the end of your message, I think you mean qualification. So the CAE exam is an English qualification.
Well then, Ivan, let's talk about some academic terms, although the first thing we have to say is that we have already talked about them. If you go back to episode 87, so go to inglespodcast.com and look for episode 87. We've put a link in the show notes. You will find plenty of academic terms, including some of those that you mentioned. But we'll add a few more today, just for a little bit of extra help.
Yeah, we've got a couple of expressions and vocabulary for you here. For example, an exam. Which verb collocates with exam? Because hacer you wouldn't translate as make, would you? You wouldn't say make an exam. That's wrong.
Not make. It's that classic mistake. Make and do. The answer is do an exam. But you can also take an exam or sit an exam. Do, take, or sit are all correct.
And if you unfortunately do not pass your exam, if you fail the first time around, then you have to take the exam again. So you could say to retake an exam, to retake an exam, to resit an exam, to redo an exam.
And there's a nice expression which is to do resits. If you fail the first time round and you have to come back in September after the summer, that is to do resits in more informal English.
Remember that common mistake that we've mentioned many times, the false friend career. Career you begin when you finish university. So when you're studying at university, you're doing a degree. So you're studying, you're doing a degree. For example, you're doing a degree in economics, or you're doing a degree in physics or in medicine or computer studies.
Could you give us an example with the word career?
Yes, I have had 3 careers. I had a short career in insurance after I finished my studies, but then I changed careers. When I was in my 20s, I started working in agriculture. So I had a career in agriculture for a few years. And then I started my teaching career just over 20 years ago. So my teaching career has lasted for over 20 years. So you can have several careers, but your career in a field or area begins after you stop studying.
So, what types of study are there? Well, if you study at university or in American English college, they would say. So, university level education is often called higher education, or HE, higher because it's higher than school. There's also FE, which is further education, which is any education after leaving school. So it could be a technical college, could be an agricultural college, a catering college, or anything like that.
So you wouldn't call a university degree further education?
No, that's a common mistake.
Okay.
They're not actually the same. HE and FE are not the same. But there is one term for both of those, which is tertiary education, which means anything after primary and secondary school. In other words, HE or FE. That's tertiary. The third step, primary, secondary, and third is tertiary.
Tertiary. There are four main degree levels when you do degrees. They are associate, so an associate degree, a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and a doctorate. So let's look at those degrees in a little bit of detail. So an associate degree is usually 2 years, a 2-year course. And you do associate degrees you do for things like nursing, if you want to become a nurse, maybe graphic design, those similar kind of vocational areas and courses. They're usually taken at community colleges and technical schools. So associate degrees. And when you finish the degree, you qualify and you can get a job. And names of these kind of degrees at the associate level include AA, which is not Alcoholics Anonymous. That's Associate of Arts. Associate of Science is AS. And Associate of Applied Science is AAS. So all of those are associate degrees, 2-year courses. Next, we have bachelors. Reza, tell us about the bachelor degrees.
A bachelor's degree is an undergraduate program, so that means you haven't graduated when you start it. It's usually 4 years, but sometimes it's actually only 3 years. And it's your major area of study is your degree. So there's just one thing usually that you study. Although occasionally people do study 2 things, in which case you would call it a joint degree. So you could do, for example, economics and geography sometimes go together. But these days, it's more typical just to study one thing. When you qualify, in other words, when you graduate, then you will have possibly a BA. That's a Bachelor of Arts. Or you could have a BS or BSc, which is a Bachelor of Science. They're the 2 main qualifications, but there are a couple of others. You could be a BFA, which is a Bachelor of Fine Arts. In other words, you did art. Or a BAS, which is a Bachelor of Applied Science.
So let's imagine you've done your bachelor's degree and you want to continue studying. The next level goes up to the master's degrees. So a master's degree programs, they're graduate programs in which you can really specialize in an area of study. And they usually take between 1 or 2 years to complete, depending if you're a full-time student, maybe longer if you're studying by distance learning. But any master's degree needs you to write a thesis for graduation. So at the end of your studies, you write a thesis. Examples of master's degrees: MA, which is Master of Arts; MS, have a guess, Master of Science; Master of Business Administration is an MBA; and an MFA is Master of Fine Arts. These abbreviations, of course, are based on the American system. You might see, instead of BS for Bachelor of Science, in the British system, BSc with a small c, so capital B, capital S, small c. And the same with Master of Science, the MS, you may see written as MSc. So, Reza, what's a doctorate, a doctoral degree? Could you explain a bit about that for the listeners?
Well, I understand a doctoral degree program as a PhD. People say, I'm doing a doctorate or I'm doing a PhD. They interchange the 2. Or they could say, I'm studying to become a doctor. But it doesn't mean they're going to work in a hospital. You can be a philosophical doctor or a doctor of philosophy. That's why we call it PH. The PH is the first 2 letters of philosophy, and D for doctor.
So you could be a doctor of most things, couldn't you? A doctor of psychology, doctor of physics?
Pretty much anything, yep. Pretty much anything. And to complete a PhD program, you have to do a very long piece of writing called a thesis or a dissertation. We mentioned that earlier in a master's degree, but for a doctorate, it's much longer. Now, dissertation, thesis, is there a difference? Well, there seems to be some confusion between American English and British English. and they seem to get interchanged. Some people prefer to call the dissertation the shorter one. Some people prefer to call the thesis the shorter one. There's a little bit of confusion here. But it seems to be that depending if it's American English or British English, they're kind of interchangeable. But one thing we can tell you is
They're very difficult to do.
they're very difficult to do.
It takes a long time.
Yeah. And if you want to complete your PhD, you will have to write a lot of words. From what I understand these days in the UK, a typical PhD thesis or dissertation, if you prefer, is at least 200,000 words. You have to write.
That's a book, isn't it, really?
It is a book. It's a small book, yeah.
A lot of research and a lot of work goes into that. So we hope that's clarified the different degrees and educational systems for you, Yvonne. And if you have any more questions, then don't hesitate to get in touch.
We've added a couple of links to some more expressions because it would be a bit boring if we just listed lots and lots of academic terms. It's more useful and more convenient for you, we think, if you go to these links yourselves and just look at the words that interest you, because they're very, very, very long lists of words. I particularly recommend the Academic Phrase Bank by Dr. John Morley. You'll find a link in the show notes if you're interested.
And the show notes can be found at inglespodcast.com/162. We'd like to take a moment to recommend our sponsor, italki. italki is a service that will provide you with a one-to-one private teacher on the internet. If you're interested in furthering your English knowledge, any aspect, your pronunciation, your grammar, perhaps you're preparing for an interview or a presentation in English, we think you could use italki to get that extra tuition on a one-to-one basis. The lessons are usually conducted using Skype. You can find a variety of teachers on their website from different countries with different experience and, of course, at different price points. If you'd like to know more about italki, go to our website, inglespodcast.com/italki. That's ITALKI. And if you sign up through our webpage, italki are offering a free lesson, $10 in credits when you buy a lesson from our webpage. And we want to say thank you to italki for sponsoring Aprender Inglés con Reza y Craig. And before we leave you, we have an email from Anna Perez, who has written to us before and sent us an email last week. Reza, would you like to read it for us?
Hello, Reza and Craig. I want to thank you for your job. I think you mean for your work, because your job would be like policeman or teacher or something. For your work. I've just passed the FCE.
Congratulations.
And you had helped me a lot. Well done, Anna.
Fantastic.
I usually go to work listening to your podcasts, even now, because I want to go on improving my English. I'm 52 years old and I don't need it for my job, but I love it since I was a child. And I better to say I've loved it.
Present perfect.
Because it's the past up to now. I'm looking for something to practice my speaking ability. But all what I find, you mean all that I find, or all I find, such as total immersion, is too expensive. Do you know something else? By the way, your voices are very, very nice. Thank you for everything. Kisses, Anna.
Thank you, Anna.
That's very complimentary, Anna. Muchos piropos.
Well, I do have one suggestion for you, Anna, and that's italki, but they do sponsor our podcast. So a disclaimer here. We do recommend their service. I've been contacted recently, Reza, by people who, like Anna, would like to improve their speaking. And one thing I suggested was to go online and speak using Skype or another video communication service. And a couple of people have responded and said that they're too shy, that they're too nervous about doing that. One thing I wanted to ask you is how you think people can overcome that. In other words, how they can not be shy and go online and start to improve their English by speaking. And also, I want to say, if you would like to write to me and give me feedback and tell me what's stopping you, what can I do or what can we do to help you not be shy and to go on the internet and practice, if I agree to go online once a week for 45 minutes and help you improve your speaking. Do you have any advice for people who are having a problem jumping off and making that first step towards speaking online?
Yes, maybe you might like to try something just to improve your confidence, to boost, BOOST, to boost, to make stronger. Boost your confidence. Why not record yourself using your smartphone or mobile phone and listen to yourself?
That's a good idea. Yeah, just play it back, play it back.
Yeah, only you'll hear it. No one else will hear it. If you pick up on, that means if you detect some mistakes, it could be grammar mistakes or vocabulary or pronunciation, it could be intonation, it could be word stress, it could be your fluency, whatever it is. Why don't you record yourself a second time and try to improve on your first effort and do it a third time if necessary and a fourth time? Why don't you do that for a week or two? And it might boost your confidence before you decide to go online. And when you do go online, who cares if you make a couple of mistakes? Nobody knows you. You're thousands of miles away, perhaps, from the person listening. No one's going to laugh at you. They don't know who you are. So there's really no reason to be embarrassed.
And remember, no one likes the sound of their own voice when they record themselves. So remember that nobody likes their voice. So you just have to jump in. You go ahead, get out your phone, record your voice. And my question for this week, for everybody listening, what is stopping you doing it? If I say next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Spanish time, I'm going on Skype, come and join me, what would stop you joining me? Please send me a voice message and tell me what's stopping you. And if you send the voice message, then you're actually doing it. You're practicing your English, you're speaking, and that's your first step to fluency. So your voice messages, send us please on SpeakPipe, speakpipe.com/Inglés podcast. And there's also a link on the webpage at inglespodcast.com. Reza, let's thank our lovely sponsors.
Yes, thank you very much to our Patreon sponsors, who are Nicole, Anna, Pedro, Maite, Lara, Maria, Sara, Carlos, Farah, Mamen, Juan, Corey Finneran, Mariel, Jorge, Raúl, Rafael, Manuel Tarazona, Agus, Manuel Velazquez, Nestor, and our most recent sponsor, Juan Carlos. Thank you very much to all of you.
Yes, thank you very, very much. And thank you too to Arminda from Madrid and Alberto from Granada, who have been lovingly transcribing our episodes. And we now have full transcriptions for episodes 131 to 142. Thank you so much. What's next week, Reza?
On next week's episode, we'll be talking about music.
That's one of my favorite subjects.
Mine too.
Thank you everyone for listening. It's been a pleasure. And until next week, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.
How are you?
Pardon?
How are you?
Pardon?
How are you?
I'll speak again.